So I would like to welcome Honorable Mr. VC Sir, Honorable Mr. Registrar Sir, and others to the first ever HNLU Alumni Connect podcast series or the HAC podcast series. So today's topic is how to land a foreign law firm job, and who better than Adarsh can talk about this. So a brief introduction about Adarsh. Adarsh is a corporate partner in the New York office of Kirkland Ellis LLP. He focuses on complex business transactions, including leverage buyouts for private equity clients, cross-border and domestic mergers and acquisitions, minority investments, and other general corporate matters. Prior to joining Kirkland, Adarsh worked as a corporate attorney at AZB and Partners Mumbai Office. Adarsh did his B.A.L.B. from Hidayatullah National Law University in 2003, B.C.L. from University of Oxford in 2010, and LL.M. from Harvard Law School in 2014. Adarsh, thank you for joining us today with the inaugural episode of the HAC podcast series. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Uday Shankar, Sir, Honorable Registrar, HNLU, to say a few words.
Thank you, Yashwardhan. And good evening to all. Good evening to the Honorable Vice Chancellor and others and my other colleagues, so Anindhya and Ankit. So podcast is all about creating a channel of informal engagement. And Alumni Affairs Committee has taken a very creative step to start this Alumni Connect podcast series. I believe with an aim to reach out to illustrious alumni of HNLU and giving a platform to the students of the university to engage in a very casual conversation with such alumni. And I welcome Adarsh Varghese. It's a matter of delight that the guest of the inaugural session of podcast is Adarsh Varghese, the first batch alum, who has a very highly accomplished career and no doubt very inspirational for the students of HNLU. I have been made to believe that every year the HNLU alum plays an instrumental role in career opportunities of the graduating batch. We look forward to expand the engagement with the alumni beyond identifying the suitable employee for the employer, but also we believe that alumni would facilitate in shaping up the future plan of the university. And I strongly believe that the podcast series will establish a strong connect between the university and alum. I congratulate Alumni Affairs Committee for taking this initiative, and I truly believe that it is going to be a very impactful session ahead. So others, welcome to HNLU, though virtually. It's very glad to see you, and we really look forward for your session ahead, and keep in touch and stay blessed. Thank you.
I think you're on mute.
Thank you for the address, sir. Now, I would like to invite Dr. V.C. Vivekanandan, Honorable Vice Chancellor HNLU, to address the inaugural session of the podcast. So,
okay, Mr. Adarsh, the chief guest for today's podcast, who is going to talk to his HNLU fraternity about his own experiential learning about positions and jobs in abroad. And then Professor Uday, Registrar, founding faculty of HNLU, and then other three, incidentally, are ex-HNLU alumni, apart from the anchor. So it looks like I'm a bit like a minority here, in a sense, which is dominated by, HNLU, stalwarts. So, but as I said that this pandemic, in a way, stunned every one of us all over the world. But I thought there is a default design in many things. And that is where we quickly first started working on the minimum digital connect, basically to talk to my faculty where I was sitting in Hyderabad. I couldn't come over here. And so we had this every week meeting just to see, simply to motivate each other and see we are safe. That was what we used the 40 minutes, Zoom free platform to do. And then quickly we thought one of the best way to keep ourselves engaged in depressing times. And then started the very interesting sui generis is the name we gave for the faculty seminar program, which we initiated every 15 days. the faculty will give a topic seminar for 35 minutes, followed by, interactive session. And so it picked up very interestingly. That was again not something which we would have done even in a physical world, normally speaking, but that was very routinely followed. Then very quickly we moved on to certain platforms which we tried to brand as much as possible. And one was XRCA, which means out of the box, trying to get some people to come and talk. And then we went and started what you call as Alma Matters, right? That was one of the things which we thought will be good to bring it, because by the time I was in touch with few HNLU alumni, and I thought there'll be another one. And then it quickly followed with one more initiative called Lex Osmos, which offered a 16 hour course, which is non-CGPA, but out of the box courses. And so that all picked up. So in a sense, the pandemic is not completely gone, but it is receded. And then we are back into the physical classes and having the, physical interaction in terms of academics. But the good thing was about the digital initiative, which came out of a crisis, but, has stabilized a lot. In that context, this extension of the Alumni Affairs Committee, which has been, I would say, the most aggressive committee among the committees in HNLU so far, has been doing a lot of work. And so they had a marathon 2-month career development, programs, which I think, I was quite, I'm often reminded every weekend, Saturday or Sunday, so there's a program, just you have to join. So I was wondering whether they just now had a program, and then again there was a program. So I would credit my faculty for doing this. In the same context, when Dr. Anindhya talked about this podcast, which I thought, is something, again, which came in this digital platforms. I thought it'll be a nice, interesting thing, which people can tune in whenever they want. I thought it's the best thing to do. So I was quite happy. And he said for me to come over and speak few minutes. And so that's why I'm here. As I said, I am myself had a great alumni experience in my post-graduation. I studied in Madras Christian College in Chennai, which is something phenomenal in terms of its Alumni Connect. If you are Madras Christian College person, any part of the world, including Timbuktu, you'll find somebody whom you can connect with MCC. Then we have our code word, what they call 3 hostels. We were part at that time. One is called Thomas, another is called Bishop Heba, third one is called Saleo. And the rivalry is something tremendous among these 3 hostels. They don't bother about losing out to other colleges, but they never like to lose to each other hostel. So that is a kind of bonding. And everybody, first question they will ask you is, which hall you belong, if you are Madras Christian College. Then you say Thomas, and then the guy happens to be Heba, and he will give the choicest abuse after many years, right, meeting you. And that's how the whole spirit of the Alumni Connect in Madras Christian College, very, very vibrant, and they have meetings regularly, annual meetings, roving meetings, not just in India and abroad. Because, Madras Christian College is 100 years old and had great jurists like Krishnaiyer, who studied in Madras Christian College. And then you have many, many people like that. So it is a very interesting thing. I was only wondering, the Alumni Connect among the national law schools, I wouldn't say something which is comparable to some of the other institutions. They are very sporadic. I was part of National Law School. 25 years they connected the alumni, and many of the old students came. Then I find a lull. So I thought probably HNLU will lead the way among the national law schools in terms of alumni, even though, as you said, we are a much younger school compared to other schools. But I do feel that the alumni here are more, passionate, and they are connecting with their juniors. And only thing, it needs to be more facilitated. So I have given rather a free hand to Dr. Tiwari and his team to go ahead and then talk about all forms, whether it's podcast or a physical reunion or a roving, kind of alumni meet in other cities, whatever is possible to do, because I consider that the motivation is about how people move out and what they achieve. So that it is, in my opinion, it is not just about jobs, it's about an inspiration of how people who made it and what is their experiential learning. So I'm pretty sure that this podcast will be another arsenal, I would call it, in the repository of HNLU digital initiative, and it will bring in much more achievers. And so I'm delighted to have Mr. Adarsh, who's been practicing out, and he'll be sharing. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that sporadic address, Mr. Sir. So if Adarsh, I think it's a bit daunting for you to take all of this nostalgia in. So I'll just give you the platform to address. I mean, if anything, if you have any nostalgic moments, or you want to say anything about the college, or you miss anything or anything up specific about the college. So yeah.
Now, let me first just thank you all for organizing this and for inviting me. First things first, it's fascinating to see Uday sir here right now. Uday sir was among one of the first group of faculty we had when we were in law school. He didn't have any gray hair then, looked a little different, but he's still as handsome as ever. So it's great to see you, sir. I must also thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor, for his leadership in organizing this. I know, Yashwardhan, you told me VC sir was very eager about this, and it's great to have somebody like that lead the university. We heard things about how the alumni committee is being very active, and what a great job they're doing. I think that's wonderful, right? Like, we now have alumni. There are people who have been out of law school for more than a decade now, and we have alumni in all kinds of places. Our alumni are doing extremely well, right? So I think it is an important function of the committee to reach out to alumni, get their perspectives. I know, I'm on the LinkedIn feed and all the social media feeds. So I see everything you're doing about alumni coming to the university, addressing students. So I think we should just keep up all of those. Both from a recruitment perspective and generally, right? Alumni can be useful in different ways, right? Just informal guidance, whatever. So big congratulations to the committee for doing all of that. I don't want to spend too much time on nostalgia right now. I mean, we can get into some of those later. All I would say is, I made some of my best friends in law school. I think it's generally true in life that, after a certain point in life, you make friends, but you don't make friends that are really close to you. I think the time you make the best friends in your life are probably law school, and then maybe a couple of years after that. The friends I call the closest even today are people I met in law school. So I'll just say that for now, and we can talk about other things as we go into this. But again, thank you for inviting me. Really honored. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Adarsh. So I won't waste much of your time, and I'll just get right into the questions, because I think that's the most juicy part people are waiting for. So Adarsh, let me ask it's a very common query. It's a collective query of all the law students in general. How does it feel living the Suits life? I mean, most of us at some point have watched Suits and saw the lavish lifestyle of Harvey Specter, and who was also associated with a Magic Circle firm in New York. In some way or the other, that show sparked the initial fire to opt law as a career. So, is your life more or less like that, or Hollywood exaggerated a lot?
Well, I hope you wouldn't be shocked if I tell you what you see in TV is not always the reality. But let me tell you this. Suits was actually shot, not all of it. Some episodes were shot in the law firm I work in, Kirkland Ellis. If people are curious about it, there is a scene where Mike and Rachel meet for the first time, which is, in a conference room. Mike goes up to the huge windows there. He's admiring the view of the city. You can see Central Park from there. That's all Kirkland and Ellis, right? So that is as close to reality as you would get. But if you think like you can practice law in a big law firm in New York without having a law degree, right? There could be nothing further from the truth. If you think you would close $1 billion deal one day and the next day you'll be in a courtroom defending somebody for murder, that just does not happen, right? And if you think all lawyers are that good looking, that's not true, right? Much as we would like to think otherwise. So it is a TV show. It's entertaining. It's dramatic. I think maybe there's a grain of truth in some of the things. So if you see the show and if you think lawyers work hard and they work long hours, that is true, right? Lawyers do work hard. If you get the feeling that lawyers abroad make a decent amount of money, there's a grain of truth in that. It's a profession, you're paid well, but you work very hard for it. It's a different question whether you'll have time to spend all the money you're making. But there is a grain of truth in that. But I wouldn't say it's very close to reality. It is a TV show. It's dramatic. But if you're on the topic of TV shows and law firms, what I would recommend people to watch is a TV show from a completely different generation. Maybe I'm too old. It's called Boston Legal. It started airing in 2004. So I don't know, 20 years now. Not that it's any close to reality of law firm life, but I think it's a far smarter and a far a funnier show. It's got William Shatner in it. I don't know if people know who William Shatner is. William Shatner used to be Captain Kirk in a show that was even older, 1960s.
Star Trek, if I'm...
Exactly. And William Shatner made news recently because he went to space in Jeff Bezos' spaceship. But Boston Legal I would think is a far funnier, far smarter show. Totally aside from the question you asked me, but I really like the show.
That's amazing. That's actually it's very helpful. So because I've before I started preparing for CLAT, so there was one teacher. So we have a GK portion. I don't know if you gave CLAT or not, but I had to give CLAT to get into HNLU. So so in the GK class, I think one of our professors, not professors, but one of our teachers, he came, like the very first class, he came to us and he said, whoever has watched Suits and is aiming for NLUs, just get the hell out of the class, because law school is nothing like Suits. The law life in general is nothing like Suits. So I mean, it is what it is, because I had to ask, sorry, but I had to ask you this because you are a New York attorney working for a big top shot law firm. So I had to ask, sorry. So moving on to the next question. So Adarsh, can you give some insights into your law school life? I mean, since you've belonged to the very first batches of HNLU, the NLU concept was not very prevalent at that time. So what made you choose NLU over other, substantial government colleges? And since you were the first batch, you had no seniors to approach to. So how did that work out for you?
Okay. Well, it's a bizarre set of circumstances on how I ended up in HNLU. I'm very happy I ended up there. So I went to school in Kerala. Every one of my schoolmates in my 12th grade, every single one of them were either doing engineering or medicine. And my best friends at that time were all doing engineering. So that's the only reason I decided I'm going to do engineering. And then, somewhere between trying to figure out organic chemistry and calculus, I realized probably this is not, the best stream for me. But by that time it was quite late, right? So I had finished 12th, I had given my board exams, and then that's when I started thinking whether I should be doing something else. And if nothing had happened, I would have just done engineering. But what happened is my dad read the news one day morning, and what he read was it's a local newspaper called Malayalam Manorama. It's one of the largest circulating newspapers because there are a lot of Keralites everywhere. That newspaper had an article on this new law school being formed in Raipur. And the only reason that particular newspaper carried the news is our first Vice Chancellor was from Kerala. So it was really an article about how a Vice Chancellor from Kerala is being appointed to this new law school. And there was a piece about it, and there was one line about how the entrance exam for that law school is going to be in June or July, I'm forgetting when. But by that time, there was no CLAT at that time. To answer your earlier question, every law school had a different entrance exam. So by that time, the cutoff date for all the other law schools had passed, and because I was not really looking into it, and because HNLU was like new, the first entrance exam for the HNLU admission was much later than all other law schools. So that's the only reason I wrote the HNLU entrance exam. And then once I got through, I somehow made up my mind that law is what I want to do. My dad was a lawyer, but that people ask me if that's why I chose law. That's really not the reason. Like, I admire what he does, but I never felt like that's the practice of law I want to get into. The closest reason what attracted me to law is, again, this is like an old reference. There's a series of books called Perry Mason. It's a fictional lawyer. The books were written in the 1940s to the 60s. It was made into a TV show in the 50s. It was very popular. HBO is now making that TV show again. It's on HBO now again. It's got, I think they started doing it again in 2021. But the premise of the show was this, of the book actually, was this fictional lawyer called Perry Mason who defends people who are innocent in courtrooms in California. There are 80 of those books. I think I've read all 80 of them. I don't know why I started reading it, but I picked up one of those books when I was in 8th grade in a library. I really liked it. So those books are what actually first made me think of law and the practice of law. And that is really the reason when I started thinking about whether I want engineering or something else, the only other thing that appealed to me was law, only because I'd read these books. That's how I ended up in, HNLU and law school. To your question on, was it difficult as the first batch? I don't think it was particularly difficult. I remember it as being exciting. We were a very small batch. We were 47 of us in the first batch, right? Really small when compared to the batch size now. There was a lot.
Are you there?
Can you hear me okay? Anindhya, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, others,
Okay.
please carry
on. I remember the time, as I said, as being exciting. I think part of it was when HNLU started, the 5 other national law schools that existed at that time had been there for a while. And after HNLU came, then there were a bigger flow of new law schools starting. But when HNLU actually started, the 5 law schools before that were fairly established. So it was the first new law school that was established in a while. And I remember, all my batchmates, having this, this fire and desire to prove to everyone that, we are as good, if not better than anybody else that goes to any other law school, right? There was a lot of excitement in trying to figure out things because, we didn't, as you said, we didn't have a senior batch to ask questions. But, I think we were a very enterprising batch. I think some of it is just circumstances, right? When you have nobody else to turn to, you do a lot more work on your own. So I think we were very enterprising. We were blessed, in the first few years with an excellent faculty. Right, we had professors like Professor Ajappa, who had a long teaching career in National Law School, Bangalore, who was a part of the initial roster of faculty. We had Professor Jafar Hussain, who again had a long teaching career. And we had a set of incredibly talented younger professors, right? Udesa was there, Shantakumar, who's now at GNLU. So I think the combination of having really good faculty plus a small batch size where we are all always trying to do what next, and trying to look at what other law schools are doing. Starting it reminds me of starting a venture type of investment, right? It's a startup, right? You have no clue there is no set way of doing things. You're doing everything for the first time. Like, you think of like, what's a SBA, right? How do you form an SBA? What kind of committees do you need, right? And if you have a committee, what does the committee do, right? What moot courts can we go to? Like, first we have to discover there is something called moot courts, right? And then like, if you're actually researching on what moot courts can you go to, right? So I remember everybody being competitive in a good way, because everybody wanted to do well as the first batch, and also putting the work to make that happen. So it was a close-knit, competitive, enterprising batch of students, which is why when I look back, I don't think of it as being facing difficulties. I think of it as being very exciting and competitive in a good way.
Right. So just another follow-up question with respect to that. So we hear Chief Justice of India talking about the system of NLU being a rather disappointing, creating a rather disappointing picture, because accordingly the notion of NLU came into picture to produce a lot of legal luminaries and a good amount of litigants. So we regularly, whenever Mr. Chief Justice goes to a particular law school, he tries to question the system of National Law School, being a producer of corporate people, going majority of them approaching corporates. So what are your views about this? So should NLUs target for producing more litigants, or because the problem here is that most of us are first generation lawyers, first generation people who opt for law, so they tend to think about making money and having a secure future. So what are your views about this?
I think my views are, I don't think law schools should push students in any direction, right? The function of a law school, to my mind, is to prepare law students for the profession, right? And the profession can be a career in corporate law. It can be a career practicing law in a courtroom. It can be a lot of different things, right? So I don't think the function of national law schools is to push students one way or the other. But I do think it's the function of law schools to prepare students for any eventuality and to show students the opportunities, right? I think it is true that most, if you take any statistical analysis, most students from law schools end up doing a corporate career. And there are multiple reasons for it, right? One is, like, you have law firms throwing a lot of money on a first year associate, which can be difficult to say no to, right? But if you are a student and you are convinced that a law firm life is not what you want, you actually want to go to courtroom and practice law, what I can tell you is, and this comes from experience, right? If what you're worried about is money, right? It is true that you do make less money, or maybe significantly less money than people who go to law firms in the beginning. But it changes, right? It changes quicker than you think. 5-6 years down the line, if you've been practicing in a court of law and you're successful, you can make equal, or if not more, money than people who are going to law firms, right? So what I would tell you is, don't look at it from a very short-term perspective about and I can imagine, because I went through it, right? It can be difficult, right? You are a fifth-year law student. There's a law firm that says you sign this contract, come August, you're going to make whatever amount of money, right? You're going to weigh that against, going to some senior lawyer who you may or may not have a relationship with and working for, much less money. But, if I understand, a lot of people may not have, family who's into law, but if you're sincere and if you're passionate about going to courtroom and practicing law, I think it is definitely worth the risk. There are people in my batch, there are people in Anindhya's batch who are all practicing law, right? And it does not need to be Supreme Court. It's not need to be the Delhi High Court. It can be local courts, right? Where you're from, right? There is something to be said about going back to the place where you're from, right? And practicing law in those courts, right? It's a very rewarding and fulfilling life. So if people are passionate about it, I would definitely encourage people to do that.
For that. So moving ahead, Adarsh, post HNLU, you attended Oxford and Harvard, which is quite a tremendous deal. I mean, kudos. So how do you think that helped you in your legal career, and what all qualities do you think a student should possess to make it to these universities? If I'm not wrong, you went to Oxford and post that Harvard after you did your I think your period of your work experience in AZB, right?
Yeah, so I worked for 2 years after HNLU. Then I went to Oxford. I came back after Oxford, worked for 2 more years, and then I did Harvard. It's not. It might look like it was a very carefully thought about strategical plan. It was nothing like that. It was again like circumstantial. I'll get into the reasons why I did it before answering the second part of your question. I always wanted to go to Oxford just because I had grown up reading about Oxford. When I went to Oxford, it was not, in my mind, it was definitely not a career-oriented move. I was not looking to change careers. I was not looking to work in a foreign firm. None of that, right? I just wanted to go to Oxford. And I wanted to read philosophy and jurisprudence, right? It had nothing to do with corporate law, which is what I was doing. And again, right, like, the reason I wanted to read jurisprudence and philosophy is because of Professor Ratchappa at HNLU, who introduced me to those subjects, right? Some of the subjects I actually enjoy the most in law school is not law. It's like the BA part of B.A.L.L.B. that people often neglect, right? When you say B.A.L.L.B., the reason why there is a BA to it is because you're not only learning law subjects, right? You're learning sociology, you're learning political science, you're learning philosophy, all of that, right? And some of the subjects, frankly, that appealed to me was those BA part of the law school life, right? And the reason I went to Oxford is just to read more of that, and Oxford happened to be one of the better places to do it. So it was completely academic. It did not have a goal other than being there was the goal in itself. So I did that, and then I came back to HNLU, and then I went to Harvard again for multiple reasons. One, I had worked in AZB at that time for 4 years. Great place to work, very exciting. But I was also like I had got this itch to see, what else can I do? Can I try something new? So that is that was one reason. The second reason is my girlfriend at that time happened to be in the US, so I wanted to be in the US. So that's why I ended up at Harvard after 2 years. And now to your question on how to get into these universities, right? It's there are 3 things that matter to my mind, right? One is academic credentials, right? Because these law schools are all judging you based on paper, right? The paper material they have in front of them. They don't see you, they don't talk to you, right? Like all they have is your academic record, which is a piece of paper. The second thing is another piece of paper, what they call the statement of purpose, right? Like it's an essay you write on why you want to go to this law school, right? Third is again a couple of pieces of paper, which is letters of recommendation from people, right? Those are the 3 things that almost all law schools judge you on when you're applying for an LL.M or a B.C.L or whatever master's degree. Out of that, I think your academic credentials carry the most weight. So it is important to have, you don't have to be like ranked 1, but it's important to have a good academic record, right? A defensible academic record. It doesn't show like I don't think there's a perfect correlation between how good you are in law school versus how good you do in your career, right? People who are ranked very high in law school don't always end up being the best lawyers, right? that's important to realize. But when law schools have to admit people, they don't have anything else to go by, right? So one of the things that they pay a lot of attention to is academic record, rightly or wrongly, right? It may not be the full measure of how good a candidate you are, but that is all they have. So academic credentials are important. The second is a statement of purpose, right? And different law schools have different requirements on how long a statement of purpose should be and how you should write it. But in essence, it really is an essay on why you want to go to this law school, right? What have you done so far in your life, right? Which makes you want to go to this law school. And then what are your future plans, right? And how can this law school help you with your future plans, right? So you have to marry all those threads into an essay, right? And the best advice I can give you is work on that essay for as long as you can, right? It's a thing that people read very closely. And I have realized that, I might write something and I think it's great and I've never written anything better than that. And I keep it aside. I come back after 5 days, read it again, and I feel like I need to change all of this again, right? So I would, if people are serious about applying for a master's degree, start working on your essay and revisit it often and often and often, right? It is worth spending the time on that essay. And the last thing is the letters of recommendation from 2 or 3, right? Law schools require either 2 letters of recommendation or 3. And again, the best recommendation I can give you on that is don't get letters of recommendation from, famous people, right? If they don't have any inkling of who you are as a candidate, right? Like your uncle might be the Chief Justice of India and you get a letter of recommendation from the Chief Justice of India, it's going to be worthless, right? Because what people are looking for are letters from people who have observed you closely, right? So depending on where you're in your career, it could either be your professors, or if you work for a few years, it could be people who are supervised your work. Those are the letters that are meaningful and convey something about who you are as a candidate, right? I can tell you when I wrote my letters of recommendation, it was Udesa was one of the people who wrote a letter of recommendation for me, right? Because he was somebody who had supervised my work, right? So you might think that getting a letter from a famous name may be helpful, but it is usually counterproductive. So those are the 3 things I would emphasize on if you're really serious about going for a master's degree. And let me add one more point, right, on why you should do a master's degree. Like, if your only objective of doing an LLM is to get a job abroad, you need to think closely about it, because if that is your sole objective, that may be an objective that may not be realized. It has nothing to do with how good you are as a candidate. Getting a job abroad has a lot to do with market conditions and a lot of other factors that are just outside your control, right? So, but if you are doing a master's degree for other reasons, right? You're interested in a certain subject, you want to read more about it, you want to have an experience, right? You want to go to a world-class institution, right? There is something to be said about, like we have great law schools in India, but these law schools in India have existed, maybe for 20 years. NLS Bangalore is what, 25 years old? Law schools like, Oxford, Harvard, other law schools, they've been in existence for hundreds of years, right? So there is something to be said about having that history and that rigor applied. So it is a completely different set of teaching pedagogy and methodology, which I think is worth being exposed to. So there are a lot of other good reasons to go to law school. Also, right, meeting people from all over the world, right? You get different perspectives, right? We all, much as we think we do not, we all live in small bubbles of our own making, right? Like it is good to be exposed to people who think differently, who come from different cultures. It just expands your horizons. So there are a lot of other reasons to go to law schools abroad. But if your sole reason is to get a job abroad, I would ask you to think closely, pay attention to market conditions, talk to people if that's your sole reason.
All right. So can you also just brief our audience about the degrees that you've done? Like in Oxford, I think it's B.C.L, and Harvard, I think Harvard provides a specialized LLM. There is no general LLM in Harvard. It's specialized. It's based on a particular area that you want to pursue in. So can you just give a brief idea about B.C.L from Oxford and LLM from Harvard?
Yeah, sure. So the B.C.L is actually the flagship program for Oxford, right? Oxford actually places the B.C.L degree above their undergraduate law degree, right? So Oxford is steeped in tradition, as you can imagine. They've been doing things a certain way for 400, 500 years. There is an order in which they award degrees in the graduation ceremony, and the way it's awarded is in the order of importance they attach to each degree, right? And B.C.L is one of the first degrees awarded in the ceremony, right? That's the importance they place on the B.C.L. You will see a lot of students who have done undergrad law degrees in the LL.B from Oxford go ahead and do the B.C.L. And it's only the best students who have done really well in their LL.B in Oxford are admitted to the B.C.L. So that way the B.C.L is placed. It has got a lot of importance. The professors who teach it place a lot of importance on the program. So when you're there and when you tell people you're doing the B.C.L, people kind of look at you with a little bit of awe and you feel good about yourself. So that is Oxford, right? Very different, probably unique among all master's degree programs. The LLM at Harvard is different. To your question, it is actually a general LLM. Harvard does not offer specialized LLMs. There are other law schools like Stanford that does specialized LLMs in IP and corporate governance and things like that. The LLM at Harvard is really 1 year of their JD program, right? So the JD program, which is the LL.B equivalent in the US, is a 3-year program. The LLM is structured as 1 year of the JD program. So you are sitting with JD students, you attend the same classes as JD students. It's just that you only do it for a year and the JD students do it for 3 years. So completely different, right? When you tell people, so there is a perspective, if you do the LLM at Harvard, people will think, oh, you're just here, you're just partying for a year. It's not a serious program. There is a perception to that. You can make whatever you want of the program. You can take whatever courses you want. All the courses that are open to JD students are open to you. But the perspective with which Harvard approaches it and Oxford approaches it is a very different, right? That is just on perspective, right? Now, if you get into, like real life practical, what can you do with a law degree from either of these programs? People will have different perspectives, but my own view is the LLM at Harvard is a little bit more practical if you want to end up working in a firm in the US. Just because, one is you need to write a bar exam, the New York bar or the California bar or some state bar. And you do need an LLM degree to write the bar exam because your LL.B degree from India does not qualify you to sit for the bar exam. You need to do at least an LLM degree to be even eligible to sit for the bar exam, at least for New York. California is different. You don't need to do the LLM to sit for the California bar. You can just write the California bar. But what the LLM degree also gives you is it gives you access to law firms and law firm partners and all of that. So there is a better route to getting a job if that is what you want to do. I think the LLM at Harvard is also a little bit more, I would call it more practice oriented, which is also because, there are a lot of courses where, practicing lawyers come and take those courses, right? The way classes are structured is, if you have a corporate governance class, you would have a corporate governance class 1 or 2 days every week. So your Tuesdays or Wednesdays, you would have a class. Then you don't read corporate governance the rest of the week. Then it's again the next Tuesday and Wednesday. That's how all classes are structured. So if you have one of those classes, right, you actually have people flying down from New York or like people working in Boston, wherever, right, like practicing lawyers coming down and teaching those classes. So it is much more practical. It is more closely aligned to the real practice of law than maybe in Oxford, because, Oxford is more, they're more grounded on, theory, the fundamental underpinnings of, lot of things, right? Which is intellectually stimulating in itself, and I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. It really depends on what you want to do. So I think when I went to Oxford, all I wanted to do was read more about certain subjects. So it was perfect for me. I was not looking to get a job in the UK or anything. But I have a friend who was with me at Oxford. The only thing he wanted to do was to practice law, right? So he did the B.C.L at Oxford along with me, came back to Madras, started practicing at the Madras High Court, realized that it is not exactly the practice of law that he had in mind. Went back to the UK. He did in the UK, to practice law, you need to be a barrister, and to be a barrister, you have to first do something what's called you have to get a pupillage in a chamber, which is very difficult to get. But the fact that he had done the B.C.L at Oxford and he did it very well, he was a Rhodes Scholar, he stood first in the B.C.L, helped him get a pupillage, which is incredibly difficult to get. And now he's like a barrister in the UK, right? So those options also open up if that is what you want to do. But predominantly, it is more intellectual pursuit than a stepping stone to law firms in the UK.
Thank you for that. Now, moving further, Adarsh, now the question of the hour, how to land a foreign law firm job? I mean, what all things the student should, work on to specifically if he or she is aiming to get placed in a magic circle firm. And since you have worked in both in the working conditions of India as well as New York, what as per you is the major difference in the working conditions of both these countries? And if you can give a little insights about WAC schemes and training contracts, and why you didn't go for WAC schemes and training contract and directly went to the US, and yeah, please.
Yeah, let me just start with a couple of things on terminology, right? So when you say magic circle firms, right, you're really referring to 3 or 4 firms in the UK. You're not referring to US firms at all, right? So magic circle firms are firms like Linkletters, Allen & Overy, Clifford Chance. They're UK firms, right? They're not US firms. And it is these UK firms that have training contracts and WAC schemes and all of that. The reason I didn't apply for them, honestly, is I did not know about them when I was like in HNLU. I probably realized that there are these things when I was in my 5th year, and by that time it was too late to apply for one of those. You'd apply for those when you're in your 4th year, right? So, that was one of the drawbacks if I think back about being in a new law school where, you don't have these systems in place, right? So it was a different set of circumstances. Magic circle firms are UK firms. US law firms are not referred to as magic circle law firms. Sometimes you hear the term white shoe firms for some of the older US law firms, but the more common parlance is big law. So BIGLL, LAWS, like one term. That's the term you usually reference for the top 20, 30 US law firms, right? So the ways of getting into magic UK firms versus US firms are a little different. UK firms have these, training contracts, WAC schemes that you can apply to when you're in your 4th year. And more UK firms are hiring from directly out of Indian law schools, right? They've been doing it for a long time from established law schools like, NUJ, NLS, and ALSA, right? They have a practice and a history of just recruiting from those law schools. I'm not sure about, how many of those have happened from HNLU, but that is definitely an avenue if people are not aware of it. It is worth spending the time and effort to figure out exactly how these vacation schemes work. As the the right committee, which is probably the the recruitment committee, it is worth the committee writing directly to these law firms that have these training contracts, introducing the law school, telling them a little bit about the law school and saying our students are interested, keep us posted on how these schemes work, let us know when applications are open, we want to encourage our students to apply. And I'm sure these law firms would be receptive, right? But if you're not already doing that, it is worth taking the time to figure out what are the firms, what are the top firms in the UK that offer these schemes, and writing to them initially as a committee, and then opening up that information to students, right? US law firms are very different. There is no direct recruit at US law firms, to my knowledge. don't recruit directly from Indian law schools, right? One main reason is because with an Indian degree, you cannot practice law in New York, at least, because you're not eligible to sit for the bar. So the tried and tested way of doing it is you do an LLM, you qualify for the bar, and then you get a job, right? The unfortunate thing about US law firm recruiting is the way law firm recruiting generally works in the US is it is all geared towards JD students. So how it happens is if you are a second year JD student, you at the end of your first year as a student in law school, you interview with law firms to come in for a summer program, right? It's called the summer program. It's equivalent to what we call, summer internships in India. It's a more formal program. You actually have to pass an interview. It's the law firms actually go to law. Each law firm goes to law school. It's spread over weeks. It's a very organized event where first year law students are interviewed for the summer program, right? It's not for a job, it's for a summer program. Law firms recruit large number of students to come in for the summer program. It's a 2-month program. People generally go to one law firm for those 2 months in the summer. So big law firms have 100, 200 students coming for their summer program. And what happens is at the end of the summer program, law firms hand out offers to the law students, right? So by the end of your second year as a JD student, you would have offers from law firms. What that means for you as a student is, end of your second year, you have a job. You have your third year of JD to go through, but you already have a job. What that means for law firms is they've already completed recruiting for 1 year ahead, right? They've already recruited a large number of students a year ahead of when they'll actually come and join the firm. So that is the market into which you're going as an LLM student. Law firms have by and large completed their recruiting because they've completed their JD recruiting. They know exactly the number of students are going to come. Then it really depends on market conditions, right? We are in a set of circumstances where we can actually contrast 2 years, right? So the last year, 2021, there was a huge demand for law students, right? It was followed by, we had a pandemic where a lot of people actually decided they don't want to be in law firms anymore, right? They just decided they want to do other things in life, right? People are sitting at home for a year or two. They decided, hey, I can do other things with my time. So what happened, it happened in India, it happened all across the world, but what happened also in the US is a lot of people quit law firms, right? Because in larger numbers than what law firms are expecting. That just opened up a huge demand for new recruiting, right? So law firms had already completed their JD recruiting, but because of the large number of people leaving, there was suddenly demand for new recruits. And last year was a banner year for LLMs, right? Because there was this huge demand that opened up. So almost every law student who had gone to a decent law school and done an LLM got a job last year, right? Because of market conditions. That was last year. This year is very different, right? This year the markets are down. There are law firms in the US that are definitely not recruiting. There are law firms that are very, very tech driven, right? They only do tech. A lot of those law firms are affected, and some of those law firms are thinking about laying off people. So this is an extremely difficult year for LLM recruiting, right? So this is a year where you may be a really great candidate. You would have gone to the best law school. You would have done really well. You have 3 or 4 years of extremely good experience, but you may still struggle to find a job just because of market conditions. It's got nothing to do with how good you are. It's just how the market is. So the unfortunate truth is there is, a lot of how you end up getting a job in New York or a US law firm is going to be driven by market conditions. What can you do to make your chances better? I think one is having work experience before you do your LLM, right? The one reason a US law firm may hire an LLM is because they have some work experience, right? So what can you do to sell yourself over a JD student who has just studied for 3 years, right? It's only your work experience, right? So this a JD student has gone 3 years to a US law school, is well steeped in US law, knows all the cultural references, right? Is from the US. And you have to stand out, from that student, right? And what can make you stand out is only your work experience, right? So what you're selling is, hey, like, I've done this kind of thing for 3-4 years. I worked in India. It's a different jurisdiction, but the kind of work I did is very similar, right? It could be a corporate lawyer, right? It's a common law country. The concepts are very similar. It's ultimately law of contracts, right? If I'm a corporate lawyer, what am I doing? I'm drafting a purchase agreement. The concepts in a purchase agreement in India and in the US are very much the same, right? So having work experience definitely helps, right? So if you're thinking about going to the US with the idea of landing a job, my recommendation would be that you work in India or wherever, right, for at least 2 years. I would think 2 to 4 years is probably the right horizon. Beyond that, it is paying attention to what the market is and how the economy is doing, right? Read about how the global economy is doing, read about how the US economy is doing. And then I think the last thing I would say is think about whether you really want to work in the US, right? I think a lot of people strongly believe, the next 10, 15 years, most of the growth is going to be in India, right? India is going to be a much bigger growth story than, a lot of other jurisdictions, right? The last 10 years or so was China, right? Everybody was really interested in China. China really drove the global economy. And a lot of people, right? A lot of smart people think the next 10 years is going to be in India, right? So, why do you want to be in the US? Are there good reasons to be in the US, right? You may still have good reasons to be in the US, but think about, can you live in India and do the same thing in India and have a very rewarding career in India, right? You should think long and hard about those options.
So, coming to the second part of my question, you've worked in both India and New York. So, what sort of difference do you think the work conditions, like with regards to the work condition, is there? And any downside of you faced in working in India and in New York? Any sort of downside or upside?
Yeah, I think couple of things, right? The practice of law is a little different. I think lawyers are equally smart in both places. What is different is, and I'm talking purely about corporate law, right? Because that's what I've done. Corporate law as an institutionalized practice of law in India began when India opened up, right? So 1990s is when India really opened up. That's when, corporate practice of law opened up. So we have been doing it for about 30 years now, right? Corporate law in the US, has been a thing for the last 100 years. And solely because, they've been doing it, it for a far longer time, it is a more sophisticated practice of law. It's got nothing to do with how smart people are. It's just because people have been doing it more. There is a market, to certain terms. There is a level of sophistication that comes with doing things for a longer period of time, because over a period of time, things evolve. So people, think about new things. So just solely because of that reason, I think it's a more sophisticated practice in the US. I think the other difference I would say is because of various reasons, India is a regulated economy, right? India is far more regulated than what the US is, right? The US is, US is open capitalist at its core, right? What that means is there are fewer regulations on how you can do business, right? India is not that. India is regulated, right? Like there are regulations on how much foreign investment come in certain sectors, right? There are regulations on what you can do with a certain company, all of that, right? So the opportunity to do innovative new stuff is a little limited, right? Just because it's far more regulated. And the reasons why India is regulated and the reasons why the US is not is historic. There are good reasons why a regulated economy makes sense for India. There is an argument to be made that being regulated help India withstand a lot of the downturn in the global economy whenever there's been a recession in the global economy, right? So it's just a fact, right? So I think just because you can do more innovative stuff in a less regulated economy, you just tend to see newer structures, newer thoughts in the US, right? But beyond that, I think the corporate practice of law at its core is the same the world over, right? It's long hours. It is a lot of hard work. It's not very different.
So, can you give an overview about your practice area? I mean, I think, if I'm not wrong, you work in mergers and acquisitions and private equity. So, I mean, what sort of, I mean, if you've also worked this area only in India as well for AZB. So, what do you think, like a sole difference between working the similar practice in India and in New York? The amount of merger and acquisition I think you are currently dealing with are more like numbers are very big as compared to India, right?
Yeah, I mean the deal size, right? What you call like the numbers is deal size, right? Are you doing like a $50 million deal, or are you doing a $1 billion deal? Deal size is different, but that by itself doesn't mean that what you do is different. Sometimes the bigger deals are just easier to do because people are not that, like, if you have $1 billion to spend, you probably don't care about every small term in your contract, right? But if you are like a small business who has like just $20 million to spend, you care about every small thing, right? So sometimes these smaller deals are more difficult to do. It's just counterintuitive because people care more about their money, right? But in terms of difference, I don't think there's a ton of difference, right? As I said, like the way you do things are different because it's a more probably a more developed economy. But at its core, I think let's think about what M&A really means, right? At its core, M&A is one company buying another company, right? Very basic, simplistic, right? So let's take an example of one, like my client is a car company, they want to buy another car company, right? And I have to draft the contract for it, I have to like negotiate the terms for that contract, all of that, right? That's at a very simple level, right? Now you can add layers of complexity to it, right? Let's assume the car company I want to buy has developed a new technology for running a more efficient engine, right? And which is why my client wants to buy this car company because they think that new technology is important, right? And now the question comes, can that new technology be patented, right? If it cannot be patented, then it's probably going to be worthless, right? Which means I have to now talk to my IP lawyers to really understand the technology, figure out, can it actually withstand an IP scrutiny, right? So that's one aspect of it. Then I might learn that, this company that I want to buy has a labor union, right? And, there are labor and employees you have to deal with, which means now I have to talk to like my employment lawyers to understand, if I have a labor union, how do you deal with a labor union? Do I need the consent of the labor union to actually buy this company, right? So then there's an employment aspect to it, right? And then there will be an antitrust aspect to it, right? My client is a car company that's buying another car company. I have to talk to antitrust lawyers to figure out, would the government look at this deal and think we are going to reduce competition and increase prices of cars, and would the government block this deal, right? There's that aspect to it. Assume my client is a car company in China, right? And is a Chinese car company buying a US car company. I have to deal with a whole set of, this is a little technical, but if there is foreign investment coming into the US, you have to go through a process called CFIUS, which stands for Committee of Foreign Investment into the US. What it really looks at is, are there national security implications, right? It may not apply to a car company, but assume the company was a company that supplies equipment to the US Department of Defense, right? A Chinese company buying a company that supplies equipment to the US Department of Defense would go through this process, right? The government would look at it to see if it impacts national security considerations of the United States, right? So that's a whole aspect to it, which is one part of doing an M&A deal. Assume I discover that this company that I wanted to buy had a litigation 2 years back because its airbags failed, right? There's a class action pending, right? Now I have to talk to like all types of litigators to figure out how big a claim that is. What do I do about that claim, right? So M&A at its core is buying one company, but it has all these other aspects that feed into it. So what I like about it is, you're not just drafting a contract and just doing the corporate aspects of it. You're talking to specialists from all kinds of areas to really understand what goes into the deal, and then bringing it all together for your client and making a recommendation and then drafting terms, right? So it's just it's a lot more than what appears in its face. So, I'm sorry, it was a long answer to a probably not what we expected, but I just wanted to like lay out what M&A really means.
First of all, it was not a long answer. I mean, I'm trying to milk you as much as I can, because the amount of knowledge that a person should have to land a job like this. I mean, it's tremendous for us. I mean, the amount of information I am getting right now, it's really bizarre. It's amazing. So just moving ahead, I know you have your time bounds as well. So just moving ahead with the last two questions. So what according to you, what a student that is currently in the first or second year of his law school should do to outstand from the rest of the batch, and to achieve what he wants?
I don't know. I also don't. I don't know. I don't think you should always think of it as what can I do to outstand myself from other people. Right? I think probably I don't know. To my mind, the better question is, what can I do to better myself? Right? It doesn't matter like what other people are doing. Right? It really depends on what can you do to be better over a period of time, any given day, right? The rest of it will just naturally follow. I think a lot of people in this world are unhappy just because they're looking at what other people are doing, right? If we all stop, comparing ourselves to other people and start thinking more about, hey, am I a little better than I was last year? Like, do I have a little bit more knowledge? Have I read a little bit more than last year? I think we would all be far more happier. All I would say is find out things that you like and what your genuine interests are. Don't just blindly follow what other people are doing. There is no one path to being successful, right? There's definitely not, right? This is born out of you. I would ask you to like talk to more alumni, and maybe not in a public forum, right? Ask alumni how well they did in law school, right? You will realize a lot of our alumni who are doing exceedingly well did not do that well in law school, right? So it is not a perfect correlation. And don't take this as me telling you, your academic credentials and doing well in law school is not important, right? It is important. What that immediately translates to you is in your first few years, you would have a step up, right? If you've done well in law school, your first job, if you want to do your LL.M, your first stepping stone would definitely be easier if you have a good law school record, right? But over the years, your skills, which are not necessarily skills that you learned in law school, would come to the fore, right? So I would, I don't know what you should do to outstand yourself, but I would say
like just adding on to your point, your one of your juniors was here like 2 days back, if you remember John Raghav, your friend as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, So he was actually just a thing to say. He was actually saying that Zia Modi still remembers you. She still misses you and all because he did such a tremendous job in AZB. So he mentioned that he very specifically mentioned that love your books, like love reading books. You should always go ahead and be willing to read books, as much books as you can, and you should always be willing to course book as well, and you know general reading. So he gave a general advice with respect to that when he was asked like what we should do to further our career, or to best to make the best versions, make out the best versions of ourselves. So he specifically mentioned that read books, as much books as you can.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? Like, just find out things that interest you and just keep reading, right? If you like reading fiction, just read fiction. There's nothing wrong with reading fiction, right? It still gives you ideas, right? I think the best strength we all have is just our intellectual capacity and our imagination, right? Anything you read sparks your imagination. The fact that you mentioned AZB just reminded me of something, so I'm going to say it. Be alive to opportunities, right? You are never going to get something you did not ask for, right? So don't think that I'm not good enough for this, so I wouldn't even apply, right? Never have that. Keep trying, right? You're not going to get an opportunity you never tried for, right? And the reason I remember this is, the reason I got my job in AZB is, in my 5th year, I had, at that time there was only one Amarchand. I had just finished my internship at Amarchand in Delhi, and I thought I had done well. I was hoping to get an offer from Amarchand, and I was waiting on that. And then I had 2 weeks, and for some reason, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but for 2 weeks I decided to go intern at AZB, right, in December, because I didn't have anything else to do. And in 2 weeks, it's very difficult to make an impression on anyone. And I didn't make an impression on anyone, if that's what you're wondering. But on my second last day at AZB, I just wrote an email to Sia and said, hey, I'm here, right? And I really liked AZB when I was there. I just wrote an email to her, said, hey, I'm here. I would really like to work at AZB, right? That's all I did. And she called me and had a 10-minute interview. I spoke to some other people. And that's how I got the job, right? Not because somebody looked at me and was like very impressed at me, solely because I wrote an email to her, right? So all I would say is, be alive to opportunities. Don't apply for something thinking you're not good enough, right? What's the worst case, right? Like, you don't get it, right? You get something else, right? So do apply, give it your best at, all opportunities that come at you.
So lastly, as you've mentioned that be alive to the opportunities, I just want to lay it out there. So as you might have observed that nowadays NLUs collaborate with international law firms in various aspects, such as conducting competitions like moots, negotiations, and training programs for students aspiring to work in those firms. And this is achieved through alumnus of that respective college working in the particular firm. So Adarsh, is there any chance that Kirkland and Ellis and HNLU can collaborate in future for any purpose? I mean, it can be for a moot, negotiation, or training program, or any other program for that matter.
Like, we should definitely think about collaborating on, like, trainings or presentations, right? Like, like, just off my head, right? Not related to HNLU, but Debanshu Mukherjee, who many of you know is at Vidhi, right? Like, he was instrumental in the bankruptcy code, right? So like we talk very seriously about coordinating on something on bankruptcy in India, because that's a big thing, right? So if there are topics like that are new, that could be interesting, we should definitely think about collaborating, right? And I also want to be perfectly honest, right? Recruiting is, as I said, right? No, it's not unique to Kirkland. No US law firms recruit directly from Indian law schools, right? It's just because with an Indian degree, you cannot practice law at least in New York, right? So the path is different. So there would be limited coordination on recruiting, but informally, we should continue talking. You should reach out to other alumni who's working in the US. Talk about what opportunities are available.
I definitely will trouble you with this. I'm not gonna leave you with this. I'll not let this go. I'll try my level best to bring Kirkland and Ellis to do some sort of program in HNLU. Thank you. I'm really thankful for that statement, and I'm gonna live by that. So,
Sure.
so by that, thank you so much, Adarsh. I mean, I'm really grateful that you took out time from your busy schedule, and it was indeed an honor to converse with you. And if Mr. Registrar sir has any parting remarks, I would give him the stage, please. So please, if you have anything.
Yeah, if I can make one parting comment, because I wanted to say this before, but I forgot. I think one of the most important skills we should all develop, and not from a career perspective, and I think as lawyers we should cherish, is the power of persuasion, right? Being able to persuade somebody of something, right? And the importance of civility in discourse, right? Two very important things, right? I think we all live in in an environment that's increasingly charged, right? People have strong beliefs about things, can be ideological, can be religious, right? We all innately have strongly held beliefs, right? But being able to persuade somebody about what we think is right, and being able to do it in a civil and amicable manner, I think is a very important skill, in the times we live in, right? Like I may be I may be a person who thinks that all cats are evil, right? I don't think that, but I could be that person. I have that belief, right? If you just tell me you are a stupid, superstitious man, right, that's not going to help, right? I'm going to continue to hold on to my beliefs, right? But being able to reason with me and persuade me and show me why what I think may not be correct is an important skill, and I think it's going to be increasingly important in our lives ahead. Thank you for that. Yeah.
So yeah, so Registrar, so if you have anything to say.
Yeah, it's indeed a kind of pleasure listening to others and kind of candid conversation which was going on, and I believe that it was a kind of mix of sending across a message to the HNLU fraternity back at the campus back in India, and at the same time a very frank sort of thought on the part of others that how block by block we need to build our career, and he has really touched upon important issues, and I would also say that his very commitment to commitment for engaging with HNLU in an institutional sense is really welcome. On behalf of HNLU, I express my thank to others for indicating a possible area of collaboration, and also I must say on a very firm way that the kind of perspective we have brought on civility, I think this is something which is the need of the hour, where we need to engage. We need to, get into a kind of discourse. We need to get into kind of dialogue for convincing each other, instead of getting into a kind of a scenario where we try to win an argument. So that's a wonderful message I believe you have given to all of us, and then we look forward to be in touch with you. And I would say on behalf of HNLU, whenever you come to India, please do take time out and visit HNLU. It has got a lovely campus. I don't know whether you have visited it or not. I'm finding it a very lovely campus. Other than what we were struggling in the initial years, where we are struggling to find out the classroom, the dining area, and a proper place for accommodation. I remember every semester, almost every year, we are on a job to look for a hostel accommodation for all of you. So it's a wonderful place, and please do come, stay with us, interact with the students, interact with the faculties, and we truly look forward for a very fruitful engagement with alumni, because HNLU truly believes, and we are of the opinion that for the traction, what is needed to make it a kind of competitor with the top tier law schools, we need a constant engagement with the alumni. And we are very proud of the very fact that HNLU alums are doing so good across the countries. I must say so, not only in India, but in abroad. And you are one of the, important strength and pillar for this kind of program. And I personally thank you for agreeing to be part of this podcast series inaugural session. With a one call, you said, yes, I'll be for sure available for the program. And thank you for agreeing for the same. And I thank the Alumni Affairs Committee for arranging this. And we look forward for engaging with you on some other program at some other platform. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, Anindhya, sir, if you have anything to say.
I believe because this is an Alumni Affairs Committee and alumni are talking, stories are in order. So I'll share one experience of mine with Adarsh. I believe it was third or fourth semester when I had a problem of understanding rule of subrogation and Temple of Priya Vihar case. I approached him in his room. He was one of the illustrious student at that point of time, and as a junior, we were all supposed to reach out to our seniors for all the problems. I reached out to him, and he suggested me, then give me some time. I'll get back to you on this case and with the concept. At the back of the mind, I thought it's just big name, and listen, he's not even trying to cooperate, and what is he supposed to do? That's okay. He's senior. What I can say. But then at 11 p.m. in the hostel, somebody knocked the door, and this gesture actually is still part of my memory. He was in the door. He was at the door. He approached me, and he sat there for around 15-20 minutes explaining the whole concept and everything. So that's if you remember, yesterday John was telling that how Adarsh was actually the Adarsh guy, right? So definitely he was. And today again, it was all the memories which flash back when he messaged you over WhatsApp that please don't call me Bhaiya. It was the first day again of HNLU when we approached him, Adarsh Bhaiya, how to do it. Let's keep it very informal. Let's not call each other Bhaiya Didi, kya Bhaiya Didi hai. So these were all the 2004 things which came back today. I was supposed to give vote of thanks, but with Alumni Affairs Committee, I believe we need to scrap this whole vote of thanks system, because in Alumni Affairs Committee, we are going to host our own people, and it's our own people who are coming back to us. So vote of thanks is something that we will be scrapping. However, we are very thankful, and sir has already mentioned that we are very thankful that Adarsh has accepted in a single message from sir in one demand. When Yashovardhan asked me, I requested sir if you can reach out to Adarsh and can reach out. He said yes, and I told yes that okay, he has said yes, let me coordinate. Then Diwali came and there were so much problems. But then again in your busy schedule, you said yes to it. Although Adarsh does not need vote of thanks from us, he being our own people, but there are people who actually deserve this vote of thanks. So let me start with the highest office, Honorable Vice Chancellor sir, who was very happy and cooperative the moment I came up with the idea. I would also thank Registrar sir for saying yes to the program and facilitating whenever I reached out to him. Although we had discussions of how to take up this program, and sir agreed upon the discussion. Then let's have the team here who needs all the credentials, all the applauses, led by Yashovardhan, and my own faculty team, Ankit sir, Garima ma'am, Barkha ma'am, Abhinav sir, all the team members who contributed to this whole program. And last, IT team, and the IT guy, Bhaiya, is already sitting over there. He's thinking, what else do we need to do right now at 9:30? So let me thank everyone. And at last, I'll thank Adarsh who joined us. So thank you, Adarsh. Thank you only for the sake that a formal event should end with a thank you. Although we want you to be in the campus ASAP. Students would like to hear from you, and we also want you to have that nostalgia. Although we will not be able to go back to that old campus, but then this new campus is worth all the penny that you will invest. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
So, with the permission of Registrar sir, we may close the session, sir.
Again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a great day ahead.